Well, welcome back once again to another episode of Talking with Tech. This is Lucas Steuber with my good friend, and we've known each other for quite a while, Mr. Pradeesh Thomas. How are you?
I'm doing good, Lucas. How are you?
I'm great. I haven't had any major vehicle accidents recently. It's been about 12 hours. This is kind of a running gag among us here, how many vehicle accidents I can be in, so that's good. But I'm very excited to speak with you. You know, you and I first connected years ago around the project I was doing with Ajit and Arinan, Avaz. But you wear many hats. So you were the founder of AlphaVista, which has since been required. But that's I think the third or fourth biggest now, or part of the third or fourth biggest staffing company.
Yeah, we were actually the fourth largest in California, and we got acquired by the Stepping Stone Group, which is actually a holding company of my therapy company, AlphaVista, Cumberland, and SOS. So okay. now we are actually the third largest in the nation.
No kidding. Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that Cumberland was one of them. That's good information to have.
Yes.
Yes. And then simultaneously, you know, I think the reason why we've really become friends is this sort of educational technology angle. So you've started this concept of the SmartEd pad originally, which has become SmartEdTech. And I know that you have a new version that just came out yesterday. So tell us a little bit about what that system is.
Okay, great. See, when I was running my staffing company, where we have close to like 200 therapists working for us that time. And that's the time where the technology tablet revolution started happening, like the iPads. And one of the things which I noticed is, a certain set of therapists are asking, okay, can I buy this up? Can I get a tablet? And then the other set is not asking me that. And then we had a clinical discussion with our clinical team about why there is actually people are asking tablets on one side and the other side, they're not asking tablets.
Right.
And then that's very, very interesting where the entire spectrum of speech therapists, they use traditional materials, some people use the technology. So we decided that why don't we give everybody a same experience, giving them everybody a tablet, which is preloaded with, close to like hundreds of apps, which are recommended by our own clinical team.
Right.
And that's where I think our first experiment started. And we tried to do that with Android tablets, mainly because of the flexibility in programming.
Sure.
My background, I'm a software engineer. I used to work in a software industry for like 15 years before I came to the staffing world. And we actually developed a product called SmartEd Pad, which is an Android tablet, which actually integrated with hundreds of the speech therapy apps in a very nice user interface.
Okay.
And we deployed to all the therapists. All our 200 therapists got that tablet that time. And then what happened is we started it as a project for our own services division. And then the school district started asking, can I buy this? This looks good.
Right.
And then that's where I think our product company was born. And then we started evaluating into iPad. So now the product is available on Android tablet, iPad, and we also kind of make it available on Chromebook, because the key thing I think which I feel is the technology. If you want to bridge the technology with resources and that can supplement the services for kids, the kids can make a lot of improvement.
Right.
Right. Especially we spend one session or two sessions a week with kids, and that's not enough for a kid to kind of make enough progress.
Right.
If you can able to supplement that with a technology where a classroom teacher, a classroom aide, and even parents can be part of that collaborative environment, the kid can able to make big improvement, and we are seeing that.
Great.
And that's actually what actually made me thinking about the technology and really worked on this technology for the last few years.
Right.
And I will tell you, still in the infancy stage, because it takes time, because the education market is not a technology market. It's a very traditional service delivery model. and everybody's trying them, right? There are teletherapy happening on one side. There are a lot of technology products coming into the market. But I think, what my objective is, we have to bring what technology you use. It doesn't matter. I think the professionals need to start using technology, and you need to become more like kind of a consultant and kind of more like a subject matter expert
right.
In this field by kind of collaborating with teachers, collaborating with aides, collaborating with parents, and coming up with the right technology where you can able to streamline your delivery, because you have only like 6 hours with kids. How can you make that 6 hours efficient and effective?
Wait, so some people get 6 hours with kids? I get like half an hour a week. What
I'm saying, what I was saying is, like, on a day, like a school system is 6.5 hours, and speech therapy spend 6 hours with multiple kids.
I see what you're saying. Right.
And most of the kids get like half an hour to 1 hour session a week. That's not enough.
Right. So this is great. You're hitting on one of my common refrains, and we have research that shows us very clearly that frequency and intensity and training of the circle of support is the biggest predictor for success in these things. And we are not in a system where we have time to have the frequency and intensity. Like, I would love to be with a student every moment of every day working on these things, but it's just simply not feasible. So, there are alternatives to that people have explored. What would you say to people that say, well, they already have too much screen time already? What are we doing with a tablet in the classroom? When we could be having direct instruction from an instructional assistant or whatever it might be.
So I think, one of the things which we learned in the process is, speech therapists, they know what they're doing, right? When they work with a kid, I want them to be kind of really work with them, not spend too much time on the screen. But when it comes to an instructional aid, they're not well qualified, right?
Right.
If like a speech therapist can able to kind of say that this is what I'm doing, and then you kind of give that in the technology and say to the instructional aid, you don't only focus on what I just give it to the student. You don't have to worry about any other things. You don't need to bring too many other materials into it, because I experimented and did working with this kid. Why don't you just drill it, or why don't you just tutor it?
Right. Right.
And that way, I think the technology can be a big piece where the speech therapist can say that, okay, this is what I work with the kid. Why don't you practice? And when the speech therapist comes in, you get back the data from the instructional assistant or even from the classroom teacher and even from the parent, analyze it and see that, how this is working, and make modification to the program.
Got it.
And that is what all about it. Like, you have an IEP goal, you are trying to work on that IEP goal and making like small progress to the kids. And when you come to your session, like, don't spend too much time on screen time. You spend analyzing the data, coming up with modification to the program, and then test it out. If it works, then again send it to the instructional aid, classroom teacher, and parents to work on it. And that's a very collaborative learning process.
Got it. Now, from working with, and so I should mention briefly, I forgot to do so, but disclosures for the audience, which is that SmartEd app does have a little bit of just a tiny little bit of art that I designed in it. I did not receive financial compensation for that, so I'm not getting paid for this interview. I'm required to say that legally. And then part two, I would say, is that Mr. Thomas has very kindly gone out of his way to explain to me all the downsides of launching my own tablet project a few months ago. So I appreciate your wisdom in that regard. But then we also have a sort of a mutual colleague in common, Ajit Narayanan, with whom I helped to create Free Speech. And one comment that he made, which I thought was interesting, was that it's very important in India, and I assume presumably also in China and other places, to create these high-tech systems that are pretty autonomous, that don't require a ton of oversight from a clinician every moment. Would you say that also informed the design of SmartEdTech, or is this very much out of the US market?
No, I think when I was developing this product, in US, you have like 6 million special ed kids.
Right.
When you look into India, India doesn't have a system like this here, but we assume based on the 10% of a population is having some kind of special need, there is 30 million special need kids in India.
Wow.
Which is not accounted for, but that's a volume. And now the technology is becoming cheaper and cheaper, where you can even get like a Kindle Fire for $50. How can we put programs like this into kind of very low cost devices and make it available to developing countries?
Right.
And the other challenge is like, the resources, like, in US, we still feel that, there's a big shortage of speech therapists, special educators. But when it comes to India, China, the shortage is huge. Like, we may have one speech therapist for like, 100,000 students, or like 50,000 students. That's the kind of, number we are talking about, because, anybody who's getting qualified as a speech therapist from India, they are actually getting migrated to other countries like US, Australia, UK for better career perspective. Okay. So that means the gap is only widening. The only way we can solve the problem is bring low-cost technology, which can be affordable to schools, parents, and the community.
Right. Well, and like you said earlier, the amount that parents or insurance companies will remunerate a speech pathologist for a single hour of service is, roughly equivalent to. I should ask you, what is the cost then of SmartEd app?
Oh, I think, now we are actually kind of coming up with very, very nice models where, like, the cost, if you own a tablet, or like an Android tablet or iPad or even a Chromebook, the cost is like only like, $5 per student per year. We want to make it very affordable to make that happen,
Okay, so for the cost of seeing me once, you could have 20 some odd copies of the app. So that's good. Now, one thing I want to touch on, again, I've been familiar with the product for a little while, but this is something that I know will speak to SLPs very well. So listen up, everyone. I am blown away by the data collection and the data tracking back end of that. To me, that is the most important part. I mean, not the most important part, but a huge advantage. And for those of you listening, if you go to tech.speechscience.org after you hear this, we'll do our best to have some examples. And of course, we'll link to the website and these other things. But you have incredibly rich data on how students are engaging with the app, how successful they are with the app, what level of prompting even they might require. What informed that? Was that the needs of the contractors at AlphaVista, or?
It all started with working with them, and then when we really see what the kids needed it, when we really did it in the real play, and the data collection is very important. So if you look at it, you can make kind of informative decision based on the data.
Got it.
So that you can say, oh, this activity is working with this kid. This kid is making progress on this goal based on this. Why don't I continue that? Because the data shows that. If something is not working, the data says that, okay, this is not working. Why don't you modify? So that way, I think the data collection is important. And I know that, the therapists are actually getting overwhelmed with a lot of paperwork.
Oh, yeah.
What we do is, on our system is, we are actually making it more like automated, or even like with 1 or 2 clicks, the data getting automatically collected.
Right.
And that's a world. I think eventually, I think, we all need more like kind of an auto data collection.
Okay.
We are actually going into the world of autonomous driving. Why don't we think about having like automated data collection based on building some right technology systems? And there are a lot of technology out there who collects data. So my advice to people is, whether you use our app or other apps, use technology in your daily.
Right. That's there's an SLP named Kate who's she has a quote that says, "It doesn't matter what church you go to as long as you all go together." And the metaphor being that if everyone's sort of on board with the same system at school and at home and with the student and everything, that's going to be more efficacious than having the perfect system that's only used once a week. And I'm a strong believer of that. Although I am very impressed with what you've done with this, because this is not an unambitious undertaking, right? So going back to the data collection, I know one thing that had been alluded to the last time I spoke to the CEO who runs this company for you was the idea of using an API, which for those listening is an application process interface, and it would allow third-party apps to join in with the data collection and the infrastructure. Do you know if that's still part of the plan?
Yes. So I think, what we were trying to do is we are trying to create an ecosystem. There are a lot of great apps out there. There are a lot of great developers actually develop great apps. But one of the things I think we are noticing is, a lot of things are not collecting data.
Right.
So we created an interface in such a way that, it's going to be like a Netflix kind of a platform. We actually built a platform. And as an app provider, you can able to connect your app into our ecosystem.
Got it.
We're also trying to work with education companies like IEP companies, like student information system companies, to kind of connect our link to their system where we can download the IEP calls, we can able to give the data back. So those kind of things. So we are trying to kind of become an ecosystem where app developers on one side, which can leverage this data tracking tool which we develop. Yep. And again, what we wanted is we want to give them free. Let them use it. We are trying to make it as more like in a kind of an open platform.
Right.
And the basic features are all going to be free for app developers. That's what we want to bring it.
That's exactly. I've been. Thank you so much for saying that, because I've been trying to convince people for years to going back to what you said about if you were to draw this diagram of special education and computer science, the overlap is like nothing. And in my experience, every single IEP system, excuse my language, sucks variously. Like some of them are good at certain things and terrible at everything else. And then so I've been waiting for somebody with the technical acumen to come in and sort of swoop in and fix that, or at least get IEP systems to talk to outside data sources in a meaningful way. So that would save me a lot of time.
I think, Lucas, that was actually initially, I think we also had that resistance, but now the IEP companies see the value. It is actually kind of bringing more collaboration, and again, it's a win-win for both parties.
Got it.
So now IEP are progressive because they see that there's a value add. They were working on the upper stream of thing. We were actually working on the delivery scheme of things. So it can complement each other. So now I think a lot of RAs are actually showing very positive signs. And again, at the end of the day, I think our goal is the data is data. If you really use the data, the beneficiary is the students.
Right.
And we can make progress because see, one of the things which I'm seeing is we are actually spending billions of dollars. A speech therapist cost a year like $100,000 plus. How can we? And the kids are actually making very slow progress.
Hey, well, not if they're working with me, okay? But all right, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, the technologies are cheap. By bridging the resources plus technology. Because the resources are very important. The speech therapists are very important, and bringing bridging the technology with the resources, you can able to make big improvement to the kids.
Sure.
And the beneficiary is the students. If I can make a student talk faster, or make them, like for example, an articulation kid, solve their articulation issues faster, and they can go to the mainstream school system. As a parent, that's the biggest moment for them.
Right.
And it's parents, their entire life is actually changed. And if we can make a considerable improvement to their lives, we are actually bringing a big thing to their life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, well, and especially with the one thing I really liked about, and I know you're moving towards the app model, which is intelligent, but in my current role, I spend a lot of time in very rural school districts and also Native American reservations where there may not be a computer at home, and so having this sort of learning device that's able to potentially go home or whatever it might be, is something that I always advocate for. And school districts are typically pretty okay with that until it comes to Chromebooks. It seems like they don't want to relinquish the Chromebooks. But I also want to commend you on developing for Chromebook, because I think we're officially now at the tipping point where it's more Chrome than we have iOS in most schools, which is surprising. But would you say that that transition, if you felt it at all, has impacted the engagement methods that you're able to use within the app?
Yeah, I think so it's very, very interesting, right? I think the devices or the things, I think, changes, because when the iPad which came into the market, everybody was going towards iPad, and then the trend changed to Chromebook, and tomorrow we don't know which will be the next.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. So what we done is we actually kind of taken a step back and said that we should think that, whatever we build should be eventually become device agnostic.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Whatever the underlying devices, we don't care.
Perfect.
It should work. So what we change is we actually kind of moved to a HTML5 model where, it could work. It could work in any browser eventually. It
Right.
could work in any devices. So that's the kind of a technology shift we made almost a year back, and that is actually help us in kind of bringing it into Chromebook. And look at a lot of schools, they are invested heavily into Chromebooks. I think if you look at it, more than 50% of the purchases in the devices now is Chromebook.
Yeah, and Google has a heck of a sales team too. That doesn't hurt. So that's great. I love what you said about device agnostic, because that's something that I think you and I have even talked about before. I've been preaching that for a while, and to whatever extent we can run something in HTML5 or whatever, then I can pull it up on my iPhone. I can, whatever. And that's, I think, one of the strengths of systems, in my world, like Cough Drop or these other things, MIT Scratch, these all run no matter what browser it might be. And so provided that's the case with what you're doing, that the data collection is all still working the same, then that's the best of all worlds, I think. Is there anything that you'd like to share about the future or the present of Smart Ed app that I haven't asked about?
Yeah. The future, I think, what we are looking is to create that ecosystem with other app developers. If you look at app developers, they're also not seeing a lot of downloads at this time. They are also struggling.
Right.
And
it's been a weird year that way. Yeah.
Yeah, because there are millions app out there. When a parent is going to look into this, there's millions app. So what we are actually trying is we're trying to create more like a marketplace. And we really want to take, whoever is actually part of that ecosystem to a bigger market. We want to kind of take a good step in the US. We want to kind of take this product into India, product to take into Middle East, wherever it's going to speak English language. And we are also looking on, you can develop your own app in any language and put it in the system. It will work, So that way, I think, if somebody wants to develop Chinese apps or Japanese app or Spanish app, you could do it. That's what we are looking create a ecosystem, create a marketplace, and help the entire world, as part of the thing. And we are actually working with some people in India. We are actually, piloting that product in India to kind of in a small way. And then once the pilot is successful, we want to kind of take it to the Indian government, which is very progressive at this point.
Right. Good. Yeah. It sounds like this is one of those systems that's, you're not baking a pie, so to speak. You're building a kitchen, right? And letting people use the tools that you've built to create what they want. I love that metaphor. I use that whenever I can.
No, I think you said it. You said it, because we are creating a kitchen. You can create your own kind of recipe, and you can create your own food and provide it in our restaurant where people can consume.
Great.
That's exactly what we're trying to do. Yeah.
What so the next thing I was going to ask actually was about non-English languages. Is the app itself supported in languages other than English, or is that up to the developers?
I think what we focused right now, it's only in English.
Okay.
But made it such a way that if somebody is going to develop this content in Spanish, the system will support it.
Okay. Well, how before I move on, I have a few other things I want to talk to you about, but for everyone listening out there, I mean, we've got a fair number of SLPs on the horn. Tell us where can we find the product? What's the URL? Can we test it? All that other stuff.
Okay, so you could actually go to our website, smartedtech.com, www.smartedtech.com, and you can download it from iTunes. You can download it from Google Play. You can download it from Amazon for Kindle, and you can also get it from the Chromebook Play Store.
Okay, great.
And yeah.
And
the app is free. You can download it for free. You can play it around, and if you like it, you could just purchase it, That's how we made it. We made it free for everyone.
Great.
To start with.
Free is a good number. That's a critical number. Yeah. Okay, great. I wanted to know that. And so once again, for those of you listening, this will be at tech.speechscience.org. Please also feel free to email tech@speechscience.org or lucas@speechscience.org, and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. We'll have your contact information available as well, sir, if you want it to be, or perhaps a member of the SmartEdTech team, because as I know, you wear many hats. So to briefly transition then, I am curious to know, obviously I sort of primed you a little bit on this, but you were just in India for a time, right? And of course that's where you've spent a lot of time in your life. What is the special education culture there like relative to the US?
Yeah, I think one of the things is if there's a kid having a special need problem, what parents are doing is parents are hiding it, because most of the parents now things are changing. When I was actually a childhood, days, parents want to hide it from others because it's a cultural thing.
Right.
Nobody wants to know that their kid is having some challenge.
Right.
No, because India is very famous for making kids education. Right. The parents spend a lot of effort and time for education, and they don't want their kid to be challenged in education, so they hide it, and that's the thing. Because if you have early attention and early intervention, that's the best cure. Right. Things are changing. There are a lot of awareness happening. There are a lot of movies coming into the field about the special need, about autism. So educated people are actually knowing the importance. If there is a problem, go and get attention. Go to a speech therapist. Go to a psychologist. Go to a school where
right.
It's changing. But a lot of kids, learning disability, it's getting identified very late. Because nobody bothered.
Got it.
We did some screening programs in India in the early stage of our this thing to make sure that what is happening. We found that there are a lot of mismatch. The kids with learning disabilities are not identified even at the age of middle school. They were struggling. They were actually. So I think it needs to be changed, but things are changing in a small way. I'm very positive that maybe in the next 10 to 20, the India will change, and even all the developing countries will change that way because of the awareness, because of the social media, because of the technology. People are having information, and I'm very happy about that because the social media is helping in a positive way, and the technology is helping in a positive way to those developing countries.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, I know that in my own efforts, particularly China has just been like a black hole in terms of trying to get any sort of intervention in there. So I was curious how that's been going for you. Okay. And then, so I was curious about that. I mean, it makes perfect sense. I mean, English is the language franca of many places, including India, when it comes to business and these things, to my knowledge anyway, it may have changed a little bit, but I wanted to back up a little bit and ask you about AlphaVista. So I know that you're not officially sort of in charge anymore, but I can't imagine you're not involved.
Yeah, so I think I started AlphaVista, which is actually a non-public agency or a contract staffing company in 2007. And we were actually working only in California. We actually grew to a 200 therapy company in 10 years. And
wow,
and it's a great journey. And all this, what I talked, I think today is based on that experience where I think I was working with therapists for the last 10 years.
Okay.
And my wife and sister both are speech therapists. So I
That's
have
right,
speech therapists at home.
Okay.
So I think it's a great field, and what you guys are doing is great. You guys are helping kids who is challenged, and I know the pressure, right? Like, you get pressure from the school, from the parents, and you have 6 hours, you have a lot of paperwork. It's a very stressful job, but what you guys are doing is great. You are helping kids. That's important. And for me, I think, AlphaVista actually taken me a total different step, because I used to be a software engineer. I used to work in the software field for the last 15 years before I came to AlphaVista.
Okay.
What I see here is, directly or indirectly, we are actually touching the life. We are actually making kind of a progress to kids, and that's a big thing. We are actually giving back.
Right.
And coming to a contracting staffing, versus like, a school district is very interesting, because, the school district, one of the challenges for school district is, their recruitment style is different, because they are very local. Like, for example, like a San Jose UST means they are very local to San Jose. What a staffing company does is, staffing company spend a lot of resources and money to kind of do a big recruitment pool. And it's very difficult, because we are recruiting an industry where the unemployment is zero, actually. If I would say that,
no kidding. Okay.
If you want a job, you have a job, right?
No kidding. Okay.
I never saw a speech therapist sitting unemployed. Only way I think you can be unemployed is you don't need to work. So there are a lot of work. So one of the things I think the staffing companies bring into the table is really a part of the school district, because the school district and that money power to kind of put a big recruitment engine out there.
Right.
The staffing company bridges that gap.
Right. Right. Good. Makes sense. Well, and I am.
And this is like,
good.
When it comes. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I've spent the last 6 years of my life in private practice, and then also in consulting and app development, right? And sort of reached a point that I think, and I'm speaking really to the SLPs out there more than anything, where you do reach a point where after 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, you start to want to spend some time with your family, So this is the first year I've actually worked with a staffing agency just to take a small position, And it's interesting from an SLP perspective, for one thing, because I'm not used to having a boss, and now I have two. I have the district and the contract agency to work with. But one thing I will say, and this isn't your company, unfortunately. I would love to work with you guys, but it's also this interesting feeling of someone having your back. It feels to me like part of the role of a contract agency is as much to be an advocate for the clinician as it is for the students in the school district, which is great. And I think that will probably help out a lot of young clinicians that maybe don't know how to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, I think I strongly recommend for young clinicians, like a staffing company is a great fit. I think, especially when it comes to their RCF, the clinic, most of the bigger companies, have great clinical mentorship, clinical field managers who can able to support them during their CF years. And, for us, like, we have a great clinical staff. Like, our VP of clinical operations is Linda Peppert, who is actually, the president of CASHA, So we have that kind of caliber people on board.
Linda Burkhart or Linda Burke?
Linda Peppert, who's actually the CASHA.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I misheard. Yeah, wow, fantastic.
Yeah. So I think, when you work for like large reputed companies, and your field managers are good, you have a great mentorship program. And then the second thing is, like, you have a lot of opportunity. Like, as like young clinicians, or you want to explore like Florida, you could go to Florida. You want to explore like, Los Angeles, you could go and work in Los Angeles, because staffing companies have openings all over the place. And again, like, as a traveling therapist, you could also benefit like a lot of this tax benefit as a traveling therapist.
Right.
So as a young clinician, you can explore the the US. So that's a great, and once you really get into the second part of your, career life, then you can say, oh, I wanted to kind of settle in this place. This may be the place. And maybe then you join a school district directly. And by that time, you may be getting into the good step of a salary schedule, because the school system works based on the number of years of experience.
Right.
You work like 7 to 8 years with a contracting company, then you are actually joining a school district at the 8th level of your experience. So you will be getting, on a salary point of view, you will be at a higher side. And when you are working in the initial time in your staffing companies where your salaries are good, so you could also kind of make more money, and also you could see the entire US if you want, and you can also get this mentorship, leadership, and career training, which you don't get that too much in a district.
Sure. Right. Well, right. Because you said, as you said, you have these sort of clinical mentors that are, part of the organization. And that's a real issue that, and I've told this story before, but I'll say it again on the air for our listeners. The genesis of me creating this website, Speech Science, is I was years ago working in a school district, and I probably have told you this story, during a very difficult IEP where the parents were crying and things just weren't working out. And part of the problem was that the SLP who was assigned to the case simply wasn't familiar with the device that the child was supposed to be using, a voice output device. And so I pulled her aside afterwards and I said, okay, let's spend 6 hours together. Let's figure this out. What's the deal? And her response was, oh, thank you. I've been afraid to ask for professional development because I think I would lose my job if they found out that I don't know what I'm doing. Which is terrifying, because that means how many of those other people are there out there, that feel that way. So it seems like a much safer route to maybe contact the contract agency, or then the purpose of Speech Science in many ways is to provide, I guess, what I would call covert continuing ed, right? So we can talk about AAC in a fun way and listen to it on your ride to work or whatever it is, dysphagia. And so far it's really been pretty successful. So I'm honored to have you on here as a guest to hopefully reap the rewards of that. So if for those listening, either speech pathologists, administrators, or whatever, how would they go about purchasing the product? They go to your website. Are there such things as volume discounts, district sales?
I think for anybody who wanted to purchase, they could go to the website www.smartedtech.com, and they will get the links. So they could go to the iTunes if they use an iPad, and they could download it for free. And what actually we are trying to do is, as an individual therapist, you could download it for free, and we have a small purchasing program. If you want to really purchase, depending upon the students. So. But I think the real benefit comes in is once the school district started leveraging it, where multiple people uses it, then you can bring all these collaboration platform, everything together, which will become really beneficial. And we are actually working with a lot of school districts now, to kind of get that in, and it takes time, Any technology, right? Whether it's our technology or different technology, the schools need to adopt, school need to invest, and it takes time. So my recommendation to all these clinicians and the school district directors is look at different technologies around you, and you guys need to really think. You guys need to spend, evaluate what is the right technology for you. Right. Because if you don't invest in technology, it's going to be challenging going forward, because the shortages are going to go up. The parents are going to give more pressure because they are going to get more information from the technology, from the internet, and from everyone, and they'll be demanding more and more service. Right. What they wanted is they wanted the kid to be improved. So if you can adopt technologies which can able to supplement what they are asking and making improvement, more the better, right? Everybody wins. Everybody wins. And at the end of the day, we are all there to kind of support each other. Right. Perfect. Now, so again, working in these very small rural school districts that I'm in right now, are there any sort of mechanisms in place for grant funding or scholarships or that, or is that on the shoulders of the teachers, I guess, to try to find that information? That's an interesting thing, So I think we actually worked with a few districts where the funding happened through some grants and other things. So we could really work with school district if they are looking for grants and other things. And one of our long-term objectives is to kind of bring kind of people who can able to kind of give away money. Like, we have one investor, he was actually looking on seeing that, okay, how can I kind of help underprivileged school district? There are people out there who have a lot of money, who can able to support kind of a district which are having some challenges. So they could invest their money on the side, which will help them to kind of acquire these kind of technologies and support. And that way, I think, the remote districts can able to leverage. And there are a lot of crowd platforms available now, like, GoFundMe and, Donor Choice. There are a lot of different sites available to kind of help teachers to kind of do some kind of crowdfunding.
Sure.
And it is very easy. I think again, Lucas, I think you need to recommend that, because that is actually becoming a lot of popularity, right? Like, there are a lot of crowdfunding platforms for teachers and parents to leverage. They don't have the money.
Right. Yep. I've been involved in those before for large projects too, for say Rupal Patel, Vocal ID, and these things that have been successful. So I think that's great. I think as long as people see the, as long as they feel the pain point, so to speak, right, which is total business talk for how much pain they're in with this get data collection and with everything else. And really, I think the argument, particularly for administrators with what you're doing, is that you're saving teacher time, right? Which is the most valuable commodity that that any school has. So, well, gosh, it's always such a pleasure to speak with you. Is there anything else you'd like to share that I didn't ask about? I feel like there's a million things I could say, but I want to respect your time.
No, thank you, Lucas. I think it was great talking to you, and what you're doing is great, because I think what you're putting out there for all the clinicians and all the people, is great, because the resources are important, right? And I really appreciate what you're doing, and I will definitely continue in any ways to help the community, right? And I'm happy to do that in any ways.
Great.
So thank you for inviting me to kind of have this talk, and wish you all the best.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Pradeesh Thomas of SmartEdTech and AlphaVista. I really appreciate your taking the time. Again, go to tech.speechscience.org, and we'll have links to everything that we talked about today. Please do check it out. It's really phenomenal. Piece of software, and I look forward to seeing what the next few years bring, because I think we're on the cusp of a real potential renaissance with technology and education. So thanks again.
Thank you. Have a good day.